Last summer, my family and I hosted a picnic for the graduation of my older sister, and we invited practically everyone we knew. As my friends and I were finding a seat to dig into our delicious meal, a member of my extended family spotted me and came over for a chat. He politely congratulated my sister, but then, pleasantries aside, he looked around, leaned forward, and whispered, "Who invited all of the white people?" Now, I was shocked. I was a little angry. However, I was more importantly awakened to the fact that many still live with mindsets that have crippled our nation for generations, as incidents in Ferguson, Missouri and Baltimore, Maryland have recently highlighted. Unless Americans of all ethnicities unite as one, prejudice will infect the generations to come. So, rather than remain crippled by prejudice, America needs those who will fight for reconciliation. So first, as a country, let's examine where we've been, then analyze where we are, and lastly, plan where we need to go. Because of slavery, America has been riddled with racial tension and prejudice since its very foundation. Even after African Americans were freed from systemic slavery, in a different way, they remained heavily bound by their surrounding society. However, because of his character, convictions, and calling, Martin Luther King Jr. became the courageous leader of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And despite opposition, Dr. King fought for a land of freedom, justice, and equality for all men. America as it was meant to be. In his book, Bloodlines, John Piper states that on April 16, 1963, from behind prison bars, King was shown a letter from white clergymen in Birmingham, who, among other things, commanded him to wait instead of force societal change. But in his famous letter from Birmingham jail, King not only responded to their criticisms, but sent a message to Americans, present and future, about his vision for reconciliation. Frustrated and concerned, King condemned the hypocritical Christian leaders of his time for not only isolating segregation to the political terrain, but ignoring it in their own congregations. Commenting on this, Reverend King once proclaimed, "It is appalling that the most segregated hour in America is 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings." Almost prophetically, King predicted that unless the church recaptures the sacrificial spirit of its past, it would be dismissed from society in the future. Now, since the 1960s, although many structural aspects of multi-ethnic relations in America have improved, King's dream has yet to be completely fulfilled because the same personal mindsets continue to plague us. This brings us to where multi-ethnic relations in America are today. America still seems to be stuck in a sickening cycle of prejudice. Because of horrific events like the Ferguson and Baltimore riots, lives were lost and communities were divided. Yet of all of their impacts, maybe most appalling, as James A. Forbes indicates, they have unveiled the deception of our nation's supposed harmony. They have revealed that as a people, our ability to know one another at the level of the heart is gravely endangered. And they have confirmed that most Americans cannot see beyond an us versus them perspective. Now, in Bloodlines, John Piper explains our culture has put forth several hopelessly ineffective solutions that are rooted in accusation. Our country's past and present condition have already proved that accusation, blaming, and griping are all futile. In truth, the same problem that Martin Luther King Jr. faced is the same problem currently hindering reconciliation: the American church. Edmund Burke once said that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And unfortunately, the modern church is a perfect example of this principle, confirming the statement of Martin Luther King Jr., which he presented more than 50 years ago. According to Lifeway Research in 2014, 86% of Protestant senior pastors say that their church is predominantly one ethnic group. Why is this? Well, as Michael O. Emerson and Christian Smith observed, instead of spreading the light of Christ into the realm of racial strife, the vast majority of God's people attempt to navigate around this real problem. And in this way, they inadvertently contribute to the problem itself. So unfortunately, the church's irrelevance has debilitated the advancement of reconciliation, for the body of Christ has left unfinished the work of reconciliation it began in the civil rights movement. So what should be our battle plan for the future? Well, as a country, we must realize there is only one who has united all ethnicities and destroyed all supernatural barriers. His name is Jesus Christ. As a country, we must acknowledge the gospel of Jesus not just as another ideology, for as Jesus himself proclaims, "If I am but lifted up, I will draw all peoples to myself." John Piper states that restoration rests on Jesus, the only solid rock, because only at the foot of the cross, pride is silenced, guilt is destroyed, and hate is vanquished. Basically, when Jesus steps into the arena, disunity disappears. However, the gospel is ineffectual if God's people do not act upon it. So in order to fight for reconciliation through the power of Christ, there are three things we must do: decide, distinguish, and diversify. First, we each must decide to be reconcilers, individuals defined not by the color of our skin, but by Jesus' unifying and cleansing blood. For in Ephesians and 2 Corinthians, Paul explains that the great mystery of Christ is that he brought unity to all things by uniting people not only to God, but to each other. This is the overwhelming truth. America will never witness a generation free from tension until the gospel of reconciliation is proclaimed from our pulpits, in our worship styles, and through our very lives. Then after we make this decision to be reconcilers, instead of seeking to become colorblind, we must start by distinguishing and valuing all cultural backgrounds, for the expression of our ethnic identities is essential in reshaping the modern American church. Miss Ruthie Johnson, a born Indian, raised in a Cuban neighborhood by white adopted parents, says that the expression of our ethnic identities is essential in reshaping the modern American church. When we respectfully share our stories with one another, we not only transform our communities, but we are set free. And lastly, we must diversify our relationships by consciously befriending those who don't look like us, who come from other parts of the world, or even who were raised differently, for genuine extensions of friendship do indeed have power. Katina Butler, a broken woman, torn apart by racial strife in her hometown, stumbled upon a church dedicated to reconciliation, and her life was transformed. With tears streaming down her face, she testified, "They pursued my heart. They wanted to know who I was, who my family was, what our passions were. It was just a huge part of God breaking my heart of stone and restoring a heart of flesh." Now imagine if broken people like Katina were restored, whole communities healed, our nation cured of tension. This will only occur when individuals like you and I dedicate ourselves to God's ministry of reconciliation, break free from our cultural comfort zones, and build healing, multi-ethnic relationships. Louis Tavor, having personally experienced the power of relationship, encourages us to learn a couple of phrases in a new language, or be okay with trying a new food, or with welcoming people into your home. It's worth feeling uncomfortable for a little while, because we can have a glimpse of what heaven will look like. Now, as we've examined the past, the present, and a plan for the future, we've identified America's need for individuals committed to God's ministry of reconciliation. During my sister's party, I was not only awakened, I was convicted to become a reconciler for the sake of our nation. And it is my prayer that you will stand with me. From Revelation 5:9 through 10, as he stood before the 24 elders of the kingdom of heaven, John heard them sing this song to the Lamb who was slain. With your blood, you purchased men for God from every tribe, language, people, and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom, to serve God, and they will reign on this earth. This song is our hope. This country is our mission, and right now is our time. Will we be bold enough to answer?